All right, welcome back. The first movie we're going to be looking at in this class, The Cinema of Transformation, is Star Wars, the original Star Wars. Now, it's also called Episode 4, A New Hope, but when it came out, when I saw it, it was just called Star Wars, so that's what I'm just going to call it. And through this movie, we're going to further go into the hero's journey and the character archetypes that are used over and over in these types of stories. And we're going to also touch on another factor, which is called supernatural help, that sometimes, much of the time, whether it's love or just a yearning in somebody's heart, that there is something beyond the hero that they are connected with or wanting to connect with. And that can help propel not only the story, but the character and their transformation through. So let's take a look at Star Wars, and we'll begin with the hero, and that is Luke Skywalker. Now, he's an unlikely hero. He's not really what he needs to be yet. He's a diamond in the rough. He has the potential. He already has skills that will very much help him along his ways, but he's a farm boy. He's away from the action. He didn't go to the academy like his friends. He's heard of the Rebel Alliance, wants to join up, but it just seems so impossible because it's so far away for him and far away from him. Until the droids show up, and this sends him on a new line of thought, and it puts him in circumstances that cause dramatic changes. One of the main ones is that he'll get to meet Obi-Wan, his mentor, and we'll get to that in a second. And it's through Obi-Wan that he learns and he grows and he develops and helps to become the person maybe locked inside him, this potential unfolded to where he can be the hero, the actual hero that he needs to be towards the end of the film. And Obi-Wan is the mentor. Now, mentor means other parent, as we've talked about. And the purpose of the mentor, obviously, is to train them, is to show them, to be an example, really in a formal sense, be a teacher that is going to help unfold this potential and bring Luke to the type of person and with the skills that he needs to have. So he's a little bit like Merlin. He's a wizard. He's a magician, and he has Luke's father's lightsaber, which he gives to Luke. And this is a pretty important thing, passing a sword from the father to the son. Very mythological, very common theme. And he also imparts the wisdom of the Force. Now, Luke really hadn't heard about it, neither had we. That's why Luke is a great spoil for us, because as he learns, we learn. He doesn't know things, so he asks questions, and we don't know those things, so he's asking the questions for us. So we learn a lot through Luke as he learns. Now, finally, Obi-Wan has to die. He has to get out of the way. This is a common theme with mentors. In order for the hero to become the hero, for the student to become the master, the teacher has to get out of the way. Now, normally we just graduate from college or high school or something, and we don't need those teachers in that way anymore because we've already graduated, and then we're out there to fend for ourselves. But sometimes in a movie or in a story, the hero has to die, or the mentor has to die. And fortunately, I guess, unfortunately for Obi-Wan, but fortunately for Luke, that's exactly what Obi-Wan does. Now, helping Luke along with his journey are allies, and initially we have R2-D2 and C-3PO. And R2 is really the catalyst, because I guess he has within him the plans to the Death Star, the message from the princess, and he really sets the whole thing in motion. He's also a trickster. Now, a lot of times this is an animal, like Toto in Wizard of Oz, we'll see later, but he has this animal instinct that he kind of goes off on his own. He has a mind of his own. He doesn't really obey the way he should, and it seems very disruptive. He ran off at night, and then, oh no, he has to go get him in the morning. it really seems like it's an ordeal or a difficulty that is presented. But as we see, every time he runs off or does something a little unpredictable, it ends up being the exact thing that's needed. So as he ran off, and then Luke had to find him the next day, well, in the process of doing that, they found Obi-Wan, which is able to get through to R2 to finish playing the rest of the message, and then the story unfolds from that point on. So also, after they meet Han Solo and Chewbacca in the cantina, we have two more allies that are going to be part of, but they are also kind of trickster too. Han is a master of deception. He's a smuggler. He disguises himself in this ship. Like I said, he smuggles, so he has these compartments in his spaceship. So he's not always who he says he is, but this trickster capacity to maybe shapeshift or be something other than what you really are can also be an advantage. And we see this play out later on. Now, every good story has an opponent, and it's hard to think of a better in a sense, or bigger, or worse, if you want to look at it that way, opponent than Darth Vader. He is evil personified. He is the personification of the Empire, the Death Star, that which the Rebel Alliance is fighting against, oppression, darkness, evil, all this stuff wrapped up into one person, and of course, the other people and equipment that he surrounds himself with. Now, this can also be seen as the shadow side of the main character. It's this darkness. We all have a shadow, a darker side that normally we keep hidden. And quite literally in the film, he represents the dark side of the Force. So, interesting aspect about the Force that it has a dark and a light side. The Force in itself is probably neutral. It's more how you use it and your intent and your dealings with that, and where you decide to use that energy, whether it's for good or for bad. So that's Darth Vader, our opponent. And this one's a little different in Star Wars. Most movies have some kind of a love story or love angle. If it's not the main story, it's usually a side story, but very, very important. And again, it's the function of these characters, these archetypal characters, how they serve the story, how they contribute to the hero's transformation that is more important. So while Princess Leia is not literally a lover, we find out later, because she's Luke's sister, that would not be a good thing. But it's the love of what's good. It's the homeland. It's beauty, innocence, peacefulness, this freedom from tyranny that the Rebel Alliance is standing up against the Empire. And when Luke sees her in the message, he's captivated by her. She's beautiful. We have to go help her. So she is, a main catalyst for the adventure too, because to just go off and do a task is often not enough. You need to have a bigger reason, that there's a higher calling. And a lot of times this is the love aspect, often through an actual lover, but it could be somebody who represents this love of something better, something greater, something good, something beautiful. In The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy wants to get home. That is where her heart is. She longs to get home. So that's this lover or this love capacity showing out through that. So it doesn't actually have to be a love interest, but it is the love of something greater, the love of beauty, that helps really motivate the character and the hero to go beyond themselves, something more important than themselves, and that's love. Okay, so those are the main archetypal characters, and we're going to move on to the hero's journey. Star Wars has been used as an example, a very good example of the hero's journey, namely because George Lucas read Campbell's work as he was working on Star Wars, and he deliberately and very consciously incorporated and applied some of these aspects really in a major way. to this film, and it may have something to do with the reason why it was so successful, because it really went along with this archetypal storytelling form of the hero's journey. And as we mentioned before, the hero's journey is divided into 3 parts: the departure, initiation, and return. And one of the main aspects of the departure, first of all, we need to know where somebody is from. We need to know about their homeworld, because to depart, you have to actually leave from somewhere. So this is this somewhere that we learn about. We learn about him. We learn about his world. And we also learn that he is really bored with his life and he wants to go off to join his friends at the academy. He's heard about the rebellion. He wants something exciting. He thinks this planet is the worst place. And we even have this great scene at the beginning. It's almost like a soliloquy that we might hear more towards about the 3/4 point in a movie. But this really shows us he's out there just staring at this double sunset. You know he's looking off into space. You know he sees himself somewhere else, that an adventure awaits. Maybe it's his destiny calling. Even though he hasn't gotten the exact call yet, physically, emotionally, he is already there. He hears it every day. Who knows? Maybe every sunset he goes up to see this, hoping that one day that he will get off this planet and go off on the adventure that he knows awaits him. And another thing that happens in this call to adventure is an initial refusal. Now, it's really shown in a strong way in Star Wars, almost in a bizarre way, because we know from Luke, we've seen him, we've heard him talk about it. He just wants to go. He wants to get off of here. If he could only get away, if he can just get off this farm. Well, then he gets this golden opportunity. He meets Obi-Wan. He sees the entire message. Obi-Wan tells him about the Force, gives him his father's lightsaber, and says, come on, you got to come with me. You got to go to Alderaan. I'm going to help the princess and the alliance. And he's like, no, I can't go. You even see him in this picture here. He's holding this lightsaber and he's got this whole adventure right in front of him. He's just leaning up against the wall like he got some really bad news, real Debbie Downer about the whole thing. But this happens. Even a home world that we are very much interested in leaving can still be hard to leave. So what happens in this film is that the situation escalates and his aunt and uncle are killed. His home is destroyed. He knows it's no longer safe for him because of these droids, and he really has no other option. But he still consciously states, I'm ready. I'm going to go with you to Alderaan, and I want to learn about the Force and become a Jedi like my father. So he does make a declarative, affirmative statement that he is accepting the call. And this is really important that we have this. Okay, now once answering the call, we are now thrust into the second stage of the hero's journey, and this is initiation. This is a long part. This is Act 2 in a movie. And the hero is now no longer in his home world. He is in this new world, this world of adventure, of strange people and things. The rules are different than the home world. And we see this at the cantina bar when they first arrive. And the alarm goes off. The bartender gets upset and says, hey, we don't serve your kind here. These droids, they have to wait outside. So right away, and we even see this archway, and there is an actual threshold. There's an actual threshold guardian with the bartender that tells us this is different. This is a different place, different rules. And he also must enter alone. Now we're going to see this theme repeat. This reliance on, in this case, Luke's case, on technology has to be stripped away for him to really learn the ways of the Force. You can't rely on machines or even your own senses, as we'll find out. So this is the Threshold Guardian. This really just underscores that different place, different rules, and you're alone. You're kind of stripped of these things that maybe had helped you so much in your home world. They're kind of taken away, or at least their importance or effectiveness is taken away because you have to develop new capacities within yourself during this initiation, because that's what it's all about. Now, about halfway through, not only this middle section, but also halfway through the movie, there's a midpoint. And this happens a lot in films, that something changes, that intensifies or realigns or even redefines what the goal is. In this case, they had picked up on the goal and they said, sure, I'm going to go with you to Alderaan, and they're on their way there. And, well, no, Alderaan had been destroyed by the Death Star, and now the Death Star captures the Millennium Falcon with our crew. And this is the point of no return. Now we're in the belly of the whale. This is being swallowed up by this story, this ordeal, this maybe the underworld that they have to go to. They weren't planning on this. Now the goal is still there. They still want to get the plans to the rebels so they can find a way to defeat the Death Star, but it takes on a whole new meaning, because now that they're on the Death Star, they have to A, not only get out, but B, once Luke finds out that the princess is there, he has to convince Han Solo and Chewbacca to help him rescue the princess and get her off of there as well. So this really intensifies things, and there really is no turning back. You really can't. Now they're swallowed up in the Death Star. Even if they wanted to, they can't turn back. So this is the midpoint. I like to call it the midpoint of no return. And later on, Luke, does rescue the princess, and Obi-Wan gets the tractor beam disabled, so they are technically able to leave, but he faces Darth Vader in this epic lightsaber battle that Luke gets to see, and in this, Obi-Wan is killed, cut down by Darth Vader. Of course, his body kind of disappears, so did he leave or did he just dematerialize? Either way, he's not there. He's no longer there to help Luke, and Luke, of course, is extremely upset. This really kind of was his only friend and certainly his mentor, but he must continue on his own. So like we had said, one of the jobs of the mentor, one of the duties he must perform is leaving, because the student has to act on their own. If you're just always accompanied by your teacher or your guide, you're not really transformed. You're not really becoming more than what you are. You're just relying on all this help. And we get supernatural help. We hear Obi-Wan say, "Run, Luke, run," right after he gets killed. So we know that there's something beyond this death, that there's something supernatural going on. And that is the Force, and that is also another way Luke gets to learn about it. Okay, now having escaped the Death Star with the princess and the plans, they arrive at the rebel base where the princess is returned, and they find a weakness in the Death Star, and they develop this plan to help defeat it. And Luke is going to be part of this attack plan, and they are successful because Luke uses the Force. So this is another gift. So they bring back the princess, the plans, and Luke, and it's what Luke brings to the table and puts to use in this final battle that really makes all the difference. This whole initiatory process really pays off. He brings everything to bear on the final battle, and they are victorious. Now, Star Wars is such an external story. It is literally an adventure. It is a huge adventure. It is epic. They are going all around the galaxy and doing all kinds of things. So there isn't much time, because it takes place over a very short time period. There isn't much time or space, pardon the pun, for there to be much of an inner story. But that said, the Force and Luke's learning about the Force and his getting to use the Force and getting better at that, that is really the inner story, because it is an inner strength. It is an inner discipline. Very zen, very mindful, very disciplined, warrior-like, like a samurai, where there's a code, or a Knight of the Round Table, something like that. that is really Luke's inner story, and that's where he develops inwardly as a person, because the Force is something, as Obi-Wan says, it surrounds us, penetrates us, binds us together, but it's something that you can use. And we learn about it, from Obi-Wan, and we learn about the weapon, the lightsaber. We also learn that it works on the minds of other people. It's not just with objects. It works on the minds of others with this Jedi mind trick that we see. And continues to learn when they're on the Millennium Falcon. And we hear from Han that he kind of hoo-haws the Force, which is fine. It doesn't really seem to hinder Luke. He's very interested and he believes in Obi-Wan and wants to learn about it. And one of the things he learns at this point is to not rely on his senses. He has to battle this remote device, sword fight it, with the blast shield down, so he can't see it. And he thinks, oh gosh, how can I, if I can't see it, how can I fight it? And he tells him not to rely on his senses. So even those can be deceiving, that this is a really intuitive, very feeling, very personal device, very, very internal discipline that he has to unfold and learn how to use. So that makes it a little more interesting. And this theme, like I said, continues in the final battle. Here we are in Act 3, at the return when they're battling the Death Star. Luke gets another message from Obi-Wan from beyond the grave and says, turn off your targeting computer, trust your feelings. And so he turns off another electronic device that he was supposed to rely on. But he's relying on something else, something greater, this inner strength, this inner power, this unfolding of the Force that he has. Even R2 gets destroyed in the trench during the Death Star battle. So he's even without his droid, just like we saw at the Threshold Guardian at the Cantina bar. So this tells us that the Force is something that you can't rely on your senses, you can't rely on technology. It is its own kind of sensory experience with its own kind of spiritual technology, if you will. So that's a breakdown of Star Wars, some of the main elements, the characters that are archetypal that we'll see over and over again, and as the hero's journey, the three main sections, and where they take place in the movie Star Wars, and we're going to break down the timeline a little bit just following this. So I hope that helps, and we'll continue on with Star Wars. Okay, we're going to take a look at Star Wars and how it relates to the hero's journey, or rather how the hero's journey works into this film, Star Wars. And we're going to break the script down, or the movie timeline, into a few parts. Call this one here, here's another one here, and here's another one. And these are the three aspects of the hero's journey. We have the departure at the beginning. We have initiation in the middle. And then we have the return at the end. And surprisingly enough, these really relate to Hollywood's versions of the hero's journey. And this is Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. Big surprise there. But they seem to line up accordingly to the hero's journey of the departure, initiation, and return. So we're going to put a little marker here, a little time marker here. I'm going to stick one right here in the middle, and this will be our midpoint. Imagine that, midpoint in the middle. So what happens in the movie, we have, at the very beginning, we have Luke Skywalker, and we don't really meet him until about 15 minutes in. It's kind of interesting. Usually you meet the main character quite a bit earlier, but there's a lot to set up. This film has a lot of setup, and then things happen very quickly as we move along. And here we have the droids with R2, with the message. Luke finally gets it. And he sees this message from the princess, and the droid runs off, and he runs after to chase it. And at this point, we meet Obi-Wan. And he is the mentor to Luke. He will show him the ways of the Force and will give him his father's lightsaber. And we will take this journey along with Luke. So what happens? Luke gets this call to adventure, okay? So we have the call to adventure. He found the droid. Obi-Wan said, oh gosh, here's this message. They play it. Okay, the princess is in trouble. The rebel needs their help. They have to deliver these plans to the rebel base so they can defeat the Death Star. And it's this great call to adventure, but Luke goes, no, I've got chores to do. I've got to go back home. So this is the refusal of the call. It's usually just an initial refusal. And why this is because this homeworld, even though he has talked about so many times, Luke has, about how he wants to get off of there, how this has been, frustrating being a farmer. He wants to get off the farm. And you would think we would jump at any opportunity to get out of there. And here's a golden opportunity to go off on an adventure and save the princess and all this stuff. Yet he still resists. He still has this initial refusal. And that happens because we're so locked into our homeworld, okay? This is the departure. This is the world from which we will be leaving. And even if we want to go, sometimes it's still hard to go. So what will happen is circumstances might intensify. In this case, they really did with Luke because his aunt and uncle got killed. And there was nothing left for him there. And then he finally accepts the call to adventure. Okay, so that's all what goes on during the departure. Now, at this point in this story, in between the departure initiation, this is sometimes called the Act 1 turning point in cinema. And it's really this threshold between the time, or right at the time, that the hero makes this conscious decision to take on the journey. And they have to then pass through the rites of initiation. So during this, at least initial part of the initiation, there are tests, there are trials, there are challenges, there are things to learn all throughout it. But what happens when they first take the journey at this point, there is a threshold guardian, and this is really the entranceway to we really know that we have left, and then we have left our home world and have gone into this initiatory phase. And here in Star Wars, there's this scene, and we talked about this earlier, in the cantina where the bartender says, oh, droids can't come in here, they have to stay outside. So this tells us that we're in a different place. We're in a different world with different rules, and what was maybe familiar and comfortable before doesn't really apply anymore. So as he's initiated into this strange world through this crazy cantina bar, he meets more allies. There's Han Solo and Chewbacca, and they are together with Obi-Wan and Luke. They are going to go to Alderaan to deliver the plans, and they do. And so finally, about right here, they finally get off the planet. So now they're in the Millennium Falcon, and they're on their way to Alderaan to deliver the plans because we have taken on this journey. And some more of what Luke needs to learn about the Force from Obi-Wan. He learns on this ship, and there's some initial doubt or really mockery from Han. He thinks, oh, okay, this crazy Force, nothing in my experience has ever led me to believe that there's some mystical force controlling everything. But of course, Obi-Wan fully believes in it, and Luke is coming around as he learns the ways of the Force, and he's very open to it. So he doesn't have this bias that maybe Han Solo has, and he learns more about the Force as we move on. Now, something happens right here at this midpoint. Something that takes the story in a new direction, or really an intensified version. And maybe it still continues on the trajectory, but there's a new challenge, a new wrench thrown into the works. And this, of course, is when they arrive at where they thought they were going to be on the Falcon, they arrive at Alderaan. They find that it's destroyed, and now we have the Death Star. And that sucks them in with the tractor beam. So now we're in like the belly of the whale, or the dark night of the soul. Yes, they still want to get the plans to the rebels, but there's no rebel base on Alderaan because there's no Alderaan, and they're sucked into the Death Star, where they not only have to escape from the Death Star, but once they're there, Luke finds out that the princess is there. Oh no. So this takes on a whole new meaning, a whole new task, a whole new level of challenges and tests and trials. And this is where Luke has a chance to really shine on his own, because he has to convince Han that we should do this. We should go rescue the princess who's in the prison, the prison deck. And Han is, weary of that at first, but Luke convinces him that he'll get all this reward money, and that seems to motivate Han. So they take on this extra challenge. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan is trying to get the tractor beam disconnected so they can leave. They go off on this journey now within the Death Star to save the princess. And that they do. And as they do, make their way back to the ship to get ready to leave, now we see Obi-Wan and Darth Vader square off. Now they are old friends. They know each other from the past. They are opponents, and they have this lightsaber battle that we watch, and it really ends up in the death of Obi-Wan. Now, this is an important aspect of a mentor. At some point, the mentor has to leave. Either the hero has to go off on their journey away from the mentor has to leave, or in this case, the mentor has to die. And it is necessary, because if you're just hanging on to your teacher or your crutch or your dictionary or whatever it is you need or you think you need to help you, you're not really doing it 100% on your own. You're not really transformed. So to get the mentor out of the way is really a great storytelling device. And this forces the hero, the main character, to then really become the master of his world. And at this point of the death, there's also what is pretty much supernatural help. And we hear Obi-Wan's voice. Even after he gets killed, he goes, "Luke, run, Luke, run." And we will hear his voice in a couple more times towards the end in the return. So they make their escape. They get on the ship, and they even have some more battles to do before they reach this point of return. And return they do. They don't return to the initial planet, but they're here at the Rebel base. And with it, they return with something. And here's what they return with. There's certainly the plans for the Death Star that they can help exploit, maybe a weakness. But they've also brought back the princess. And maybe even just as important, we have Luke. And Luke has the Force. So he has really brought back the Force with him. And it is with Luke and his Force, or his connection to the Force, that really play a major factor and help defeat the Death Star and the Empire at the end. So this is the return with the gift. And it's not just enough to show up. Okay, so he gets here. Okay, well, I'm here. Here's the plans. Here's the princess. Well, that's great, but now we have to put it to work. And we have what takes place is the battle against the Death Star. So we have really the final battle, which usually takes place here in Act 3 or at the return, where all this has to be brought to bear on the task at hand. And that goal, of course, is to destroy the Death Star and to give the Rebel Alliance a victory in their quest to help defeat the evil Empire. So things happen really quickly from the midpoint on, but a lot of this story takes place at the beginning, and Luke really has this hard time, or it seems like it takes him a long time, answering the call. And this will come up a lot. Sometimes there's also a refusal of the return. At this point, we may see that the main character, having spent all this time in the initiatory world, maybe this becomes the new home. And to want to go beyond that, to want to return, this becomes scary to leave, because now we've learned the rules of this other world. And it can be kind of comforting or somehow scary to want to leave this place. So there might be a refusal of the return as well as the refusal of the call that Luke really seemed to be concerned with. So this is a quick breakdown, and this shows how the 3-act structure in Hollywood relates to the 3 phases of Campbell's hero's journey: the departure, initiation, and return, and where they take place in the movie. And this is Star Wars, and we'll do this with the other movies as we go along. So hope this helps, and I look forward to hearing your responses in the forum questions. So that's about it for Star Wars, and we'll see you next week.